Blood drips from her bare feet as she chases the wagon, her children crying in her arms. Sarah can't hear their screams, but she feels their tiny bodies shaking with fear. Her husband, the man who promised to love her despite her deafness, drives away, leaving them alone in the dark forest. Her legs give out, and she falls to her knees in the mud. Death seems certain, but then a shadow passes over them. A mighty eagle swoops down from the clouds, its wings spread wide like a guardian angel. It lands on a branch and stares at her with eyes that seem to hold ancient secrets. Why would this powerful bird stop to watch over a helpless woman and her children? What does it know that she doesn't? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's fingers trembled as she twisted the gold band on her finger. 6 years of marriage turned worthless in a single afternoon. The ring caught the last rays of sunlight, mocking her with its false promises. Little Emma, barely 4, tugged at her skirt, while 2-year-old James whimpered against her chest. Night was coming. The forest loomed darker with each passing minute, and the autumn wind cut through her thin dress. Sarah touched her throat, feeling the vibrations as she tried to comfort her children. Though she couldn't hear her own voice, she hoped it sounded steady, sure, the way a mother's voice should sound. The wedding ring slipped off easily, surprisingly easily, for something that had once meant forever. Sarah stared at it, this small circle of metal that had bound her to a man who'd promised to protect them all. Now it was just dead weight, like the memories of his lies. Emma pointed at something, a hollow in an ancient oak tree, its opening partially hidden by thick roots. Sarah peered inside. It wasn't much, but it would shelter them from the wind. She helped Emma crawl in first, then squeezed inside with James, pulling her torn skirts close around them both. Her mother's sewing kit still hung from her belt, the one thing she'd grabbed instinctively when John had told her to get out of the wagon. Her fingers found the familiar shape of the thimble, the smooth wooden spool of thread, tools of creation, of mending. But some things couldn't be mended. James snuggled closer, his small body shivering. Sarah wrapped both children in her shawl, trying to share what little warmth she had. Above them, branches creaked in the wind. Every shadow made her flinch, every rustle seemed to hide danger. Without sound to guide her, the darkness felt absolute. The moon rose, casting silver light through the leaves. Sarah's eyes had adjusted enough to see Emma's tear-stained face. The little girl's hands moved in the simple signs they'd developed together. "Scared, Mama." Sarah pulled her daughter closer, signing back, "Together strong." It was one of the first phrases she'd taught her children, determined they would never share her isolation in a world of sound. A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness. Sarah's heart jumped. She pressed deeper into the hollow, positioning herself between her children and whatever lurked outside. The moonlight caught something moving, low, four-legged shapes slinking between the trees. Wolves. Emma must have made a sound because James started crying harder. Sarah held them tighter, her body rigid with fear. The shapes moved closer. She could almost see their eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then, from above came a rush of air. The massive eagle from before descended like a shadow, its wingspan blocking out the moon for a moment. It landed on a branch directly above their hollow, its fierce gaze fixed on the darkness beyond. The wolves hesitated. Sarah watched, barely, breathing as the great bird spread its wings again, letting out what must have been a cry. The shadowy shapes retreated, melting back into the forest like morning mist. The eagle remained on its perch, head turning slowly as it surveyed the area. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. In all her life of silence, she'd never felt so clearly that something was watching over her. She looked down at the wedding ring still clutched in her palm. With sudden decision, she reached out and buried it in the soft earth at the base of the oak. Let it stay with the lies and broken promises. Tomorrow would be about survival. Emma's small hands moved again. "Bird friend?" Sarah nodded, managing a smile. "Yes," she signed back. "Bird friend." The eagle stayed through the night, a silent, Sentinel. Sarah didn't sleep, but she felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. She had her children. She had her hands, her will to live. And now, it seemed, she had a guardian in the sky. As the first grey light of dawn touched the trees, Sarah began planning. They needed water, food, better shelter. The eagle took flight with the rising sun, but she knew somehow it would return. In its place, it left a single feather, golden brown, and perfect, resting on a root near their hollow. Sarah picked up the feather, running her fingers along its edge. Strong, yet flexible, like she would need to be. She tucked it into her sewing kit, beside the tools that had always given her. Independence. Yesterday, she had been a wife. Today, she would become a survivor. Dawn brought with it a bitter chill. Sarah's hands shook as she helped Emma and James out of the hollow tree. Their stomachs growled. The children's last meal had been yesterday morning in the wagon. She brushed leaves from their clothes, her mind racing. Which direction? Every tree looked the same. Every shadow held uncertainty. The eagle appeared again, circling overhead. Sarah watched it glide lower, then sweep toward the east. She remembered her father's words. Water flows down. Follow the land's slope. The eagle seemed to be leading them downhill. Emma tugged her sleeve, pointing at tiny purple berries on a bush. Sarah's heart clenched. She didn't know which plants could kill. She pulled Emma's hand back, shaking her head. The little girl's lips trembled, but she nodded. Already, learning survival's harsh lessons. They followed the eagle's path, Sarah carrying James, while Emma trudged beside her, occasionally stopping to rest her tired legs. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows that made Sarah jump at every movement. Without sound to warn her of danger, she kept her eyes constantly moving, scanning for threats. After what felt like hours, they found water, a clear stream cutting through the forest floor. Sarah set James down, showing both children how to cup their hands and drink. The water was cold enough to make their teeth ache, but it was clean. She soaked her torn feet, wincing at the sting. The eagle landed on a dead tree across the stream, its head cocked as if waiting. Sarah studied the bank, noticing worn places in the mud, a trail, not made by animals but by human feet. Her heart leaped. Where there were trails, there might be shelter. They followed the stream bank, Emma now riding piggyback, while Sarah carried James. The trail grew more distinct, definitely human-made. Old boots had packed down the earth, branches had been cut back. Then through the trees she saw it, a small cabin, its log walls weathered grey with age. Sarah approached cautiously, looking for signs of habitation, smoke from the chimney. Fresh footprints, anything? But the cabin sat silent, leaves piled against its door. She set the children down and pressed her palm flat against the door. No vibrations from movement inside. The door creaked open at her push, hinges rusty but intact. Dust motes danced in, the sunbeam that followed them inside. It was a single room, sparse but dry, a bed frame with a rotting mattress, a table, a stone fireplace, and most importantly, a cupboard. Sarah rushed to it, hoping for food. Inside she found tinder, flint and steel, some mouldy flour she wouldn't risk, and her hands trembled. A folded piece of leather. She opened it carefully. A map, crude but clear, showing rivers, mountains, and most importantly, settlements. One was marked less than 3 days' walk away. Emma and James huddled together on the bare floor, exhausted. Sarah found a bucket, showed Emma how to stay put while she fetched water. The stream held small fish, if she could figure out how to catch them. The forest around the cabin had berry bushes she could study, learn which were safe. Back inside, she cleared the worst of the dust and debris, making a clean space on the floor. The children curled up together like puppies while she examined the map more closely. Whoever had lived here had marked good hunting grounds, dangerous areas, even places where friendly tribes camped seasonally. The eagle's cry drew her to the window. It sat on a nearby branch, preening its feathers as if pleased with itself. Sarah pressed her hand to the glass, nodding her thanks. They had shelter, water, and now a map to guide them. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, As the children slept on a bed of fresh pine boughs, Sarah studied the map by the light of a small fire. She traced the route to the nearest settlement with her finger, memorizing each landmark. Tomorrow, they would begin learning how to live in this wilderness. But for now, they were safe, they were together, and they had a plan. The eagle kept its vigil outside, its silhouette visible against the rising moon. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes, it seemed, help came with wings. Morning light filtered through the cabin's grimy window when Sarah awoke to Emma's urgent tapping. The little girl pointed outside, her eyes wide with wonder. There, in the clearing, stood an elderly Native American woman, her silver hair in long braids, gathering plants with practiced hands. Sarah's first instinct was to hide, to protect her children from this stranger. But something in the woman's peaceful movements, the careful way she handled each plant, made Sarah pause. The eagle circled overhead, calm and unhurried. If their winged guardian wasn't alarmed, perhaps this encounter was meant to be. Still, Sarah positioned herself between the door and her children before stepping onto the cabin's threshold. The woman looked up, her weathered face creasing into a gentle smile. She held up empty hands, a universal sign of peace, then pointed to Sarah's feet, which were still raw and bleeding from their flight through the forest. The woman reached into her medicine bag and pulled out a handful of leaves, miming a crushing motion, then pointing again to Sarah's feet. Her meaning was clear. She could help. Emma, always braver than her mother, slipped past and approached the woman. Sarah's heart jumped. But the eagle swooped low, landing on a nearby stump as if to watch over the interaction. The old woman's eyes followed the bird's flight, then returned to Sarah with newfound interest. "Wakia," the woman said, pointing to the eagle. Then she touched her own chest. "Morning star." Sarah touched her own chest, then signed as she spoke. "Sarah." She pointed to her children. "Emma, James." Morning star's eyes lit up at the sign language. Her hands moved in different patterns, not Sarah's signs, but clearly a language of their own. Though the specific gestures were foreign, the concept of visual communication bridged their differences. Over the next hours, Morning Star taught them which plants could heal and which could harm. She showed Sarah how to crush yarrow leaves. For her bleeding feet, how to make a poultice from plantain for Emma's scraped knees. Each lesson came with carefully demonstrated motions that Sarah could understand without words. James, usually shy, watched in fascination as Morning Star wove a small basket from reeds, showing him how to identify the right plants by touch and smell. She filled it with berries, teaching Emma which colors meant food and which meant danger. Using sticks in the dirt, Morning Star drew maps of seasonal plants, showing when and where to find food. She demonstrated how to set simple snares, how to spot rabbit trails, how to read the direction of the wind. Each lesson was a gift of survival. By midday, Sarah's feet were wrapped in healing leaves and a collection of dried plants hung from the cabin's rafters. Morning Star had shown them how to dry herbs for future use, how to store medicine for winter, how to find food when the forest seemed empty. But the most precious gift came when Morning Star unrolled a bundle of soft deerskin. Inside lay carefully preserved plants, each tied with different colored threads. She showed Sarah how each bundle treated different ailments, fever, wounds, stomach pain, the knowledge of generations passed down in a single afternoon. As the sun began to set, Morning Star prepared to leave. She pressed the medicine bundle into Sarah's hands, her eyes serious as she pointed first to the eagle, then to Sarah's heart, then to the rising moon. Sarah didn't understand the full meaning, but she felt the weight of the message. Something about destiny, about following, signs about trust. Emma cried when Morning Star left, but the old woman promised to return with the next full moon, using gestures to show the moon's cycle. She left them with more than just medical knowledge. She'd given them hope, showing how the forest could be a home rather than just a place of exile. That night, as Sarah prepared a tea from their new herbs, she watched her children play with the small reed basket. Emma was teaching James the signs for different berries, mixing their family's sign language with the new knowledge they'd gained. The eagle's silhouette passed across the moon as it made one final circle before roosting. Sarah touched the medicine bundle, feeling the different textures of the dried plants. Each one represented survival, but more than that, they represented connection. In her silent world, she'd often felt isolated, cut off from others. But today had shown her that there were many ways to communicate, many ways to learn, many ways to survive. She added the eagle's feather to the medicine bundle, combining their guardian's protection with Morning Star's wisdom. Tomorrow, they would practice their new skills. Tomorrow, they would be a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more at home in this wilderness that had first seemed so hostile. The fire crackled in the hearth, and though Sarah couldn't hear it, she could feel its warmth, see its light, and know that they were no longer alone in their journey. The storm came without warning. Sarah felt it first in the air pressure against her skin, then saw it in the eagle's sudden agitation. The great bird circled frantically, diving lower than usual before flying east with urgent purpose. Emma, now attuned to their guardian's behavior, tugged at Sarah's skirt and pointed to the western sky. Dark clouds rolled in like a black tide, turning day to twilight. The wind picked up, bending young trees nearly double. Sarah grabbed James while Emma gathered their medicine bundle and what little food they had. The cabin wouldn't be safe. Its roof was already half-rotted, and Sarah had seen the way it swayed in even gentle winds. They followed the eagle's path, fighting against the strengthening gusts. Sarah's skirts tangled around her legs as rain began to fall in heavy sheets. She couldn't hear the thunder, but she felt each boom vibrate through the ground and saw purple-white flashes tear across the sky. Emma screamed. Sarah felt the vibration of it through the hand she clutched as lightning struck a massive oak. Not 50 yards away, the tree split with a violence Sarah could feel through her feet, its ancient trunk burning despite the rain. But in that flash of light, she saw what the eagle had been leading them toward, a cave entrance, half hidden by vines. Sarah dragged the children toward it, her heart pounding as another lightning bolt illuminated their way. Inside, the cave, mouth narrowed to a tunnel, then opened into a broader space. Sarah pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the solid rock. Here, at least, the wind couldn't reach them. Emma produced their flint and steel with shaking hands. Sarah had taught her well. Within minutes, they had a small fire from dried moss and twigs they'd carried in their medicine bundle. The flames revealed ancient paintings on the cave walls, handprints, animals, and most striking of all, an eagle with outstretched wings. James whimpered, pressing against Sarah as the storm raged outside. She held him close, watching the cave entrance. For signs of flooding, Morning Star had taught them to watch for flash floods, how water could rise faster than a horse could run. But the cave floor sloped upward from the entrance. They would be safe here. The fire cast dancing shadows on the wall paintings, making them seem to move. Emma traced the eagle drawing with careful fingers, then signed to Sarah. "Same friend?" Sarah nodded, though she wondered at the coincidence. How long had eagles been guiding travelers to safety in these woods? Hours passed. The children slept, exhausted from their flight, while Sarah kept watch. She collected a piece of the lightning-struck oak, bark still warm from the strike, one edge crystallized to glass from the heat. Morning Star had taught her that such things held power, and Sarah could feel it in this fragment of wood that had survived nature's fury. When dawn finally came, the storm had washed the forest clean. Sarah led her children outside to find their eagle perched on the remains of the split oak. The morning sun struck its feathers, creating a golden halo effect. As they watched, it swooped down to the cave entrance, landing beside a fresh spring the storm had revealed by washing away years of debris. The children ran to drink from the clear water while Sarah studied their shelter in daylight. The cave paintings told stories she wished she could understand, tales of hunts, of changes in the seasons, of survival. Their own story now joined those ancient ones, A mother and her children, guided by an eagle, sheltered by stone while lightning split the sky. Sarah added the lightning-struck wood to their growing collection of treasures, next to the eagle. Feather and medicine bundle. Each item marked a lesson learned, a hardship survived, a step further from the woman who had once depended on a husband's false promises. The eagle took flight, circling once before heading east again. Sarah understood now. It wasn't just leading them to safety, it was teaching them to survive, one challenge at a time. She gathered their belongings, ready to follow once more. The children moved with new confidence, Emma helping James over fallen logs, while Sarah checked their direction against the rising sun. They were learning the forest's language, its warnings and its gifts. The storm had tested them, but they had emerged stronger. Sarah touched the lightning-struck wood in her pocket and smiled. Sometimes destruction led to discovery, and fear gave way to wisdom. The morning after the storm, their eagle led them through a narrow pass between two hills. Sarah's feet were healing thanks to Morningstar's medicine, but she still stepped carefully over the rain-slicked rocks. Emma walked close behind, helping James navigate the rough terrain. Their small family had developed a rhythm in their wilderness journey, each watching out for the others. The pass suddenly opened into a view that stopped them all. Below stretched a hidden valley, emerald green and sheltered by steep cliffs. A stream meandered through its heart, and Sarah could see fruit trees scattered across the meadows, apples and wild plums, their branches heavy with ripening fruit. Emma tugged at Sarah's skirt, pointing excitedly at movement in the grass. A family of deer grazed peacefully near the stream, unafraid in this protected space. This wasn't just a valley, it was a sanctuary. As they made their way down the slope, Sarah noticed odd shapes in the earth, straight lines too regular to be natural. Emma, always curious, scratched at a raised portion of soil and uncovered a piece of worked stone, an ancient foundation, long reclaimed by nature. James, toddling a few steps ahead, stumbled and fell. When Sarah rushed to help him up, she saw what had tripped him. A beautifully crafted arrowhead, its stone surface worn smooth by time. She held it up to the light, admiring the skilled workmanship. Someone had lived here once, had made this valley their home. The eagle landed on a curved piece of wood protruding from the earth, part of an old building, Sarah realized. All around them were signs of previous habitation, stone circles that must have been fire pits, mounds that suggested buried structures, even traces of old gardens still producing plants not native to the forest. Emma discovered it first. A douche, spring bubbling up from between stones, laid in a perfect circle. The water was sweet and cold, and around the spring grew plants Sarah recognized from Morningstar's teachings, medicinal herbs, carefully arranged. This hadn't been a random settlement. This had been a place of knowledge, of healing. They spent the afternoon exploring. Sarah showed the children how to dig wild roots Morningstar had described, their effort rewarded with sweet, starchy tubers. They found berry bushes heavy with fruit, and Sarah carefully compared each variety to Morningstar's lessons before allowing the children to eat. The sun was lowering when they heard the wolves, but these weren't the threatening shadows from their first night. These wolves moved openly through the valley, more curious than aggressive. The eagle, still watching from above, showed no alarm. One wolf, grayer than the others, approached them slowly. Sarah kept her children close but stood her ground, remembering Morningstar's teachings about respecting the forest's creatures. The wolf sniffed the air, then sat calmly several yards away, as if acknowledging their right to be there. That night, they made camp in the remains of an ancient dwelling. The stone walls still stood waist-high, offering protection from the wind. Sarah built a fire in what had once been a hearth, the familiar stones still arranged in their age-old purpose. As the children drifted to sleep, Sarah studied the arrowhead by firelight. She could almost feel the hands that had shaped it, the eyes that had checked its balance, the mind that had envisioned its form in raw stone. This valley had been a home once. Perhaps it could be again. The wolves' howls echoed off the cliff. Walls, but they no longer sounded threatening. Like the eagle's cry, they were becoming part of the valley's voice, its welcome to those who came in peace. Sarah added the arrowhead to their growing collection of treasures, placing it beside. The lightning struck wood and eagle feather. Emma stirred in her sleep, signing unconsciously, "Home!" Sarah watched the firelight play across her daughter's peaceful face. Perhaps Emma sensed it too. This valley wasn't just a place to pass through. It was offering itself to them, sharing. Its ancient secrets, its protected spaces, its abundance. The eagle had led them here for a reason. Sarah looked up at the stars, visible through the broken roof of their shelter. Tomorrow, they would explore more, learn more, begin to understand why this hidden valley had called to them. For tonight, they were safe, they were fed, and they were exactly where they needed to be. The sound of horses' hooves sent Emma running back to the shelter, her hands flying in urgent signs. Sarah couldn't hear the approach, but she saw the dust rising above the trees. Her heart raced as she quickly gathered the children into the ruins of the ancient dwelling. The eagle circled overhead, calm and unhurried. Sarah had learned to trust its signals of danger or safety, but still she positioned herself between her children and the valley's entrance. 3 days in this sanctuary had made them cautious of outside intrusion. A wagon appeared, drawn by 2 dappled horses. The driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, pulled his team to a stop at the valley's edge. Trade goods filled his wagon, pots, tools, cloth, and other necessities of frontier life. He raised his empty hands just as Morningstar had done, showing peace. Sarah emerged slowly from the shelter, keeping the children behind her. The trader smiled, then did something unexpected. His hands moved in familiar patterns. Sign language, different from Sarah's but clearly meant to communicate. He pointed to himself. Thomas Bear, Emma, unable to contain her curiosity, darted forward to watch his signing more closely. The trader's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth as he reached into his wagon and brought out a string of bright glass beads, offering them to the little girl. Sarah's hands moved in response, telling their story through gesture. The trader's face darkened with anger as he understood their abandonment. He spat in the dust and made the sign for coward, clearly referring to John. From his wagon, Thomas produced paper and a pencil. His written words were simple. 3 days to River Fork Trading Post. People there need seamstress. Safe place. I guide. Sarah studied the man's honest face, the way he spoke directly to Emma in sign language, his gentle handling of the horses. The eagle landed on a nearby tree, preening calmly. She had trusted its judgment before. Thomas opened a trunk in his wagon, showing them rolls of fabric, needles, threads, things Sarah could use, could trade her skills for. He held up a warm wool blanket, gesturing at the approaching autumn. Then he pulled out more trade beads, these ones in deep blue and silver, catching the sunlight like drops of sky. Emma was already climbing the wagon wheel to better see the treasures within. James, usually shy, reached for the beads with wondering fingers. Sarah felt tears in her eyes at the simple kindness of this stranger, this bridge back to the world of people. The trader shared his food with them, dried meat, fresh bread, even a precious orange for the children to share. As they ate, he wrote more. Your husband known to law, wanted for other crimes, trading post safe. Many friends there. Sarah's hands shook as she read the words. She wasn't the first then. There were others he had betrayed, abandoned, perhaps worse. The blue trade beads felt heavy in her palm, a weight of decision. The valley had been a sanctuary, but winter was coming. The children needed more than what nature alone could provide. They needed community, warmth, the protection of walls and people. Thomas waited patiently as Sarah gathered their few possessions: the eagle feather, the lightning-struck wood, the ancient arrowhead, Morningstar's medicine bundle. Each item told part of their story, their growth from desperate refugees to survivors. Emma helped James climb into the wagon, already chattering in their private sign language about the adventures ahead. Sarah took one last look at the valley that had sheltered them, the ancient walls that had offered protection, the wolves that had become neighbors. The eagle launched from its perch, soaring ahead as the wagon began to move. Sarah clutched the trade beads, feeling their smooth surfaces like a promise. Thomas had said 3 days to the trading post, 3 days to a new beginning. As they followed the old trading path out of the valley, Sarah saw their time here differently. It hadn't just been a sanctuary, it had been a preparation. Each skill learned, each challenge faced, had made them ready for this next step. The blue beads caught the light like water, like sky, like hope. Sarah wrapped them around her wrist, a new kind of promise to replace the wedding ring she'd buried. These beads spoke not of dependency, but of trade, of skill, of earning one's own way in the world. The first frost came earlier than expected, silvering the grass outside the trading post. Sarah watched Emma's breath form clouds in the morning air as she helped carry firewood. 2 weeks since Thomas had brought them here, and already the world was changing. The trading post had welcomed them, especially after Sarah proved her worth with needle and thread. Her fingers, skilled from years of careful stitching, could mend the most delicate fabrics or the toughest leather. But watching the frost, she knew thread alone wouldn't keep them warm through winter. The eagle appeared that morning, landing on the trading post's fence with something in its talons, a rabbit freshly caught. Sarah understood the message. It was time to learn new skills. Mrs. Martinez, the trader's wife, found Sarah studying the rabbit's fur. Without words needed, she brought out her own collection of pelts and began to teach. Sarah's fingers learned the feel of proper skinning, the way to stretch and cure the hides, how to turn animal fur into human warmth. Emma proved to be a quick study, her small hands perfect for the delicate work of fur preparation. Even James helped, carrying scraps and tools, proud to be useful. Each day brought new skills, identifying the best pelts, proper tanning techniques, the art of piecing fur together. The eagle continued to bring them gifts, rabbits, squirrels, once even a young deer. Each pelt was carefully preserved, each scrap saved. Sarah's needle danced through the furs, creating something new from the offerings. The coat took shape slowly. Sarah combined the softest rabbit fur for the lining with stronger pelts outside. She added hidden pockets for medicine bundles and emergency supplies, remembering the lessons of their forest time. Every stitch was a promise of survival. Other women at the trading post began to notice. They brought their own contributions, bits of leather for reinforcement, extra fur from their hunting husbands, wisdom about which stitches would hold best against winter wind. Sarah's project became a community effort, each edition carrying the knowledge of women who had survived many winters before. Emma watched it all, her hands moving constantly in their private sign language, adding new signs for each new skill. Soft fur, strong stitch, warm safe. Their vocabulary grew with their capabilities. The coat's hood took special attention. Sarah lined it with the softest fur, shaped it to shield against wind while allowing her to maintain the full range, a vision she relied on. Without hearing to warn her, she needed to see clearly in all directions. As the coat neared completion, Sarah added one final touch, a single golden eagle feather secured in a hidden seam near her heart, a reminder of the guardian that had led them to safety, had taught them to survive, had shown them the way to this new community. The first real snow came the day she finished. Sarah wrapped the coat around herself, feeling the weight of all it represented, the animals that had given their fur, the women who had shared their knowledge, the journey that had brought them here. Emma signed, excitedly, "Mother Bear now." Sarah smiled at the comparison. The coat did give her that appearance, strong, protective, natural. She gathered her children close, the coat large enough to wrap around all 3 of them. Outside, the eagle soared over the trading post, its silhouette dark against the snow-heavy clouds. Sarah touched the hidden feather through the coat's layers. They were ready now, ready for winter, ready for their new life, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. That night, as the first blizzard howled outside, Sarah sat by the fire in their small but warm room. The coat hung nearby, its fur gleaming in the firelight. Emma had fallen asleep tracing the stitches, her fingers learning the map of their survival. James curled in Sarah's lap, secure in the knowledge that his mother could keep them warm. Sarah ran her hands over the coat's surface, feeling each different fur, each careful stitch. This wasn't just clothing, it was a testament to how far they'd come from that first desperate night in the forest. They had learned to take nature's gifts and turn them into protection, to transform fear into preparation, to build security with their own hands. The morning of the town meeting dawned cold and clear. Sarah adjusted her fur coat, making sure Emma and James looked presentable. 3 months at the trading post had given them stability, but today would determine their future. Mayor Richardson had called the meeting specifically for them. Winter had proven Sarah's worth. Her skilled hands had mended everything from torn coats to broken harnesses, saving more than one settler from the bitter cold. But living at the trading post was meant to be temporary. The town needed to vote on permanent residence. The eagles circled the town hall as they approached, a sight that no longer surprised the settlers. Some even nodded to it in greeting, having accepted it as part of Sarah's strange but compelling story. Inside the hall, Sarah felt the vibrations of many feet, many conversations. Emma squeezed her hand, signing quickly, many people watching. The room was indeed full. Farmers, traders, craftsmen, all gathered to decide their fate. Mayor Richardson stood at his desk, the town registry open before him. Its leather-bound pages contained the names of every official resident since the town's founding. Sarah could see the gravity in his expression as he called for order. Mrs. Martinez stepped forward first, speaking for Sarah since she knew her story best. She told of Sarah's arrival, her skills, her dedication to her children. Other women joined in. The blacksmith's wife spoke of Sarah's clever repair of leather bellows. The schoolteacher praised Emma's quick mind and willingness to help younger children. Thomas Bear, who had returned for winter trading, stood to speak. His hands moved in sign language as his voice carried to the hearing members of the crowd. He spoke of finding them in the valley, of their resilience, of the eagle that seemed to mark them for something special. Sarah watched the faces in the crowd, reading their expressions as she'd learned to do from childhood. She saw sympathy, admiration, and, most importantly, acceptance. These people had seen them work, seen them contribute, seen them survive. The mayor lifted his pen, preparing to write in the registry. But first, he gestured for Sarah to approach. Through Mrs. Martinez's interpretation, he asked if she would take the settler's oath, commit to the community's laws and mutual protection. Sarah's hands moved clearly, her signs translated by both Mrs. Martinez and Thomas Bear. This place has given us shelter, work, and respect. We offer our skills, our loyalty, and our hearts in return. Emma darted forward, her own hands flying. We help too! The crowd chuckled, tension breaking. James, not to be outdone, toddled after his sister, drawing more smiles. The mayor dipped his pen and wrote with careful strokes, Sarah Mitchell and children, Emma and James, full citizens of River Fork Settlement. The date followed, the ink drying like a promise on the page. But he wasn't finished. Below the entry he added a note. Special recognition. Demonstrated exceptional courage and skill in wilderness survival. Contributions to community include essential winter clothing repair and introduction of improved leather working techniques. The crowd erupted in cheers that Sarah could feel through the floorboards. Emma jumped with excitement while James clung to her skirts, overwhelmed by the energy in the room. Mrs. Martinez hugged her, pressing a small gift into her hands, a new sewing kit, crafted by the blacksmith himself. Through the window, Sarah saw the eagle land on the hall's roof, as if witnessing their acceptance. In just a few months, they had gone from abandoned outcasts to valued community members. The town registry made it official, but Sarah knew it. It was their own efforts that had truly earned their place. That evening, celebrating in their small room at the trading post, soon to be exchanged for a proper house, Sarah traced the eagle feather sewn into her coat. The registry entry meant more than just citizenship. It meant safety, community, and a chance to build something new. Emma was already signing about the house they would help build come spring, about the garden she wanted to plant, about teaching other children their special sign language. James slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had found their home. Sarah looked out at the star-filled sky, remembering that first desperate night in the forest. They had lost a false home then, but found a true one now, one built on their own strength, one earned through their own efforts, one recorded in the town registry, not as charity cases, but as valuable members of a thriving community. Spring brought more than just wildflowers to River Fork Settlement. Sarah watched from her new front porch as Emma clutched her slate to her chest, practically bouncing with excitement. It was her first day of proper schooling, and the small black tablet represented everything they'd fought to achieve. Miss Thompson, the schoolteacher, had visited yesterday to discuss Emma's education. She'd arrived with the slate, a gift from the school board, and an open mind about teaching a child who moved between the world of silence and sound. "We'll learn together," Miss Thompson had written on the slate, her chalk strokes firm and clear. Then she'd asked Emma to teach her some signs, showing the same enthusiasm for learning that she hoped to inspire in her students. Now Emma stood at the crossroads, one path leading to the schoolhouse, another to the trading post where Sarah had set up her permanent sewing shop. James watched from Sarah's arms, too young for school, but old enough to sense the importance of this moment. The eagle swooped low over the schoolhouse, casting a brief shadow over the freshly painted building. Emma grinned and signed quickly. "Bird friend says learn well." Sarah smiled at her daughter's interpretation. The eagle had become their family's own private omen of good fortune. Inside the schoolhouse, other children crowded around Emma's slate as she demonstrated her special way of communicating. Sarah watched through the window as small hands imitated Emma's signs, clumsy but eager to learn. Miss Thompson beamed at the impromptu language lesson. Sarah's heart swelled as she saw Emma take her place at a desk, slate propped carefully before her. The same hands that had learned to gather berries and prepare furs now gripped chalk, ready to gather knowledge. Their time in the wilderness hadn't hardened her daughter. It had made her stronger, more adaptable. In her sewing shop, Sarah hung a small slate of her own, using it to communicate with customers about their specific needs. Words and signs flowed together, creating understanding where once there had been barriers. James proved to be an eager student too, though his classroom was the shop itself. He watched Sarah work, his tiny hands trying to mimic her stitches with a blunt needle and scrap cloth. Sometimes customers would write him simple words on the slate, delighting in his attempts to copy them. The eagle's presence became part of the school day routine. It would perch in a tall oak near the schoolhouse, watching over the children at play. Some said it was just a bird, but Sarah knew better. It was a reminder of their journey, their survival, their transformation. At day's end, Emma ran from the schoolhouse, slate covered in careful letters and simple sums. She'd learned to spell her name, to count to 20, to write thank you and good morning. But more importantly, she'd learned that being different didn't mean being less. Other children followed her home, fascinated by her silent language. Soon, small groups gathered on Sarah's porch after school, slates filled with written words, while hands moved in elementary signs. Emma proved to be a natural teacher, patient with beginners, just as Sarah had been patient teaching her survival skills. The slate became more than a teaching tool. It was a bridge between worlds. Through it, Emma shared stories of their time in the forest, of the eagle's guidance, of Morningstar's wisdom. The other children wrote their own stories in return, creating a dialogue that transcended speech. Sarah often paused in her sewing to watch these impromptu lessons. She saw how the wilderness had prepared them for this too, teaching them that communication found a way, that understanding grew from patience, that community could be built one careful connection at a time. That night, as Emma practiced her letters by candlelight, Sarah remembered the desperate mother who had chased a wagon through the forest. That woman could never have imagined this moment. Her daughter in school, her son growing strong, her own business thriving. The slate on their table, covered in Emma's careful chalk marks, was proof of how far they'd come. The eagle's cry echoed in the darkness, a familiar lullaby now. Emma looked up from her slate and signed sleepily, "Tomorrow more learning." Sarah nodded, touching the feather in her coat. Yes, tomorrow would bring more learning, more growth, more proof that their hardest journey had led them exactly where they needed to be. The wanted poster arrived with the spring mail wagon. Sarah saw it first in Thomas Bear's hands, his face grim, as he tacked it to the trading post's bulletin board. Her own hands trembled as she read the words, "Wanted, John Mitchell, for abandonment, theft, and fraud, across 3 territories." The artist's sketch captured John's features with unsettling accuracy. The sharp chin, the heavy brows, the smile that had once seemed charming but now looked cruel. The reward offered was substantial, $500 for information leading to his capture. Emma spotted the poster on her way home from school, her slate nearly dropping from suddenly nerveless fingers. Sarah quickly gathered her daughter close, turning her away from the harsh black letters that spelled out her father's crimes. The eagle's cry split the evening air, sharper than usual. It circled the settlement with unusual urgency, as if sensing the disruption to their hard-won peace. Sarah felt its agitation mirror her own racing heart. Sheriff Davies called a meeting at her shop that evening. He brought a stack of reports. John Mitchell had abandoned other wives in other towns, stolen money, left debts unpaid. But what chilled Sarah most was learning he'd been seen just 2 settlements away. "He's working his way back through his old territory," the sheriff explained through written notes. "Probably looking for easy marks, people who knew him before." He didn't have to spell out that Sarah and the children might be targets. The town rallied immediately. The blacksmith installed new locks on Sarah's doors and windows. The trading post ladies organized a watch schedule. Even Miss Thompson kept Emma and James inside during school breaks, her slate filled with extra lessons to distract them. Sarah sewed late into the night, her needle flickering by lamplight. She added hidden pockets to all their clothes, places to conceal money or messages. The skills that had helped them survive the wilderness now served to protect them from a different kind of predator. The eagle maintained its vigil, now joined by others from its kind. 3 golden eagles circled the settlement daily, their shadows sweeping the streets like nature's own patrol. The townspeople took it as a sign. Sarah's family had powerful allies. Emma's nightmares returned, the first since their early days. In the forest, she would wake signing frantically about the wagon, about being left behind. Sarah began keeping her old fur coat draped over Emma's bed, the hidden eagle feather a silent guardian against dark dreams. But Emma's fear soon turned to anger. One morning she marched to the wanted poster and added her own message in careful chalk letters. "He left us to die." The town children, now fluent in basic signs, spread her story. John Mitchell's name became a warning, a lesson about courage and cowardice. Sarah found herself watching the roads, but not from fear. The woman who had once chased a wagon in desperation now stood ready, strong in her shop doorway. She had survived wilderness, wolves, and winter. She would survive this too. The wanted poster became a symbol of transformation. Women from neighboring settlements, hearing the story, began bringing their sewing to Sarah. Some had their own stories of abandonment, of survival. Sarah's shop became a place of quiet strength, of shared resilience. Thomas Bear brought news. From his trading route, other settlements were watching for John, ready to raise the alarm. The network of frontier communities, once so isolated, drew together in protection of their own. One evening, as Sarah locked up her shop, she saw the original wanted poster had been joined by others, warnings about various outlaws and thieves. But John's picture stood apart, bordered now by tiny drawings and messages from the town children. They had made him into a cautionary tale, a story of justice waiting to be served. Emma traced the reward amount on the poster, then signed with fierce determination, for school books. Sarah hugged her daughter, amazed at how she could transform even this darkness into hope for the future. The eagle landed on the trading post roof, its eyes fixed on the western road. Sarah touched the feather in her coat, remembering all it had guided them through. Let John Mitchell come, if he dared. They were no longer the helpless family he had abandoned. They were settlers, survivors, and they were not alone. The wagon wheel broke at the edge of town, its splintered remains marking John Mitchell's inglorious return. Sarah felt the commotion before she saw it. Townspeople running, children being hurried inside, the vibration of horsemen gathering. The eagle's shadow swept over her shop, its cry a warning she could feel in her bones. Through her window, she saw him for the first time in 8 months. John looked smaller somehow, his fine clothes now shabby, his confident stride reduced to an angry stagger. He was waving papers, marriage certificates, she guessed, and pointing at her shop. Emma and James were safe at the schoolhouse with Miss Thompson. Sarah had drilled them for this moment. At the first sign of trouble, stay with trusted friends, wait for her signal. Now, watching John's approach, she was grateful for every harsh lesson the wilderness had taught her about survival. Sheriff Davies and his deputies moved to intercept John, but he dodged between buildings, clearly familiar with evading lawmen. The eagle screamed again, diving so low that John had to stumble backward, cursing at the massive bird. Sarah stepped onto her porch, letting him see her. She wore the fur coat, a symbol of everything she'd achieved without him. Her hands moved in clear, deliberate signs that everyone in town now understood. No fear. "Woman!" John bellowed, trying to sound authoritative, but his voice cracking. "I've come to collect what's mine, my children." The town's response was immediate. Women appeared in doorways, men stepped forward, and children peered from windows. All hands moved in the sign language Emma had taught them. "Not yours." John's face contorted with rage. He reached for something in his jacket, a gun perhaps, but the eagle struck again, its talons slashing air inches from his face. He sprawled backward, landing hard against his broken wagon wheel. The sheriff's men surrounded him now, but Sarah held up her hand. She walked forward, each step deliberate. The woman who had once chased his wagon in terror now approached with the quiet strength of someone who had built a life from nothing. She pulled out her slate, the same one she used to teach children, to run her business, to build connections. On it, she wrote in clear, strong letters, "You abandoned us to die. We chose to live." John tried to sneer, but his expression faltered. As he took in the crowd, everyone there knew their story. Everyone had contributed to their survival. Everyone was ready to protect what Sarah and her children had built. "They're my family," he sputtered. "I have rights." The eagle landed on Sarah's porch roof, joined now by 2 others. Their wings spread wide, casting shadows over John that made him look small, insignificant. In that moment, Sarah saw him clearly, not the charming man who had once promised to care for her, but a coward who had never understood real strength. Thomas Bear stepped forward, dropping a stack of papers at John's feet. More wanted posters, more accounts of abandonment, more evidence of his crimes. The broken wagon wheel behind him seemed to mock his attempts at escape. Sarah's hands moved, again signing for the whole town to see. "You left us with nothing. We built everything." She gestured to her shop, to the school where her children thrived, to the community that had become their true family. The sheriff moved in with handcuffs, but John had one last burst of desperate energy. He lunged toward Sarah, only to be met with a wall of townspeople. They moved as one, hands raised in silent denial of his claims, bodies forming a barrier between him and the family he had tried to destroy. The eagles struck in perfect unison, their wings creating a storm of dust and confusion. When it cleared, John was face down in the dirt, his fine clothes torn, his schemes ended. As the sheriff led him away, Sarah noticed something symbolic. The broken wagon wheel had split completely, its circle of false promises finally shattered. Emma and James emerged from the schoolhouse once the danger passed, running to Sarah with their slates clutched tight. On Emma's, she had written a single word: free. That night, the town celebrated in the meeting hall. The eagles perched outside, their usual vigilance relaxed into something like satisfaction. Sarah added a piece of the broken wagon wheel to their collection of artifacts, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far they had come. Emma's hands moved in the candlelight, sharing their story once again, but now with a new ending. They had faced their past and emerged stronger. They had transformed abandonment into belonging. They had built something even John's return couldn't break, a life of their own making. The first warm winds of late spring brought an unexpected visitor to River Fork Settlement. Sarah was teaching a group of women her fur-working techniques when Emma burst into the shop, signing so quickly her hands blurred. "Morning Star, by the river." Sarah found the elderly medicine woman sitting calmly by the water's edge, the eagles circling overhead as if they'd expected her arrival. Morning Star's face creased into a smile as she held out a leather pouch, its surface decorated with intricate beadwork. Inside lay a crystal, clear as stream water, but with a strange, shifting light at its core. Morning Star pressed it into Sarah's palm, then used the signs they'd created together during those first desperate days in the forest. "Eagle Spirit Stone," she signed, "sees truth, brings healing." The crystal caught the sunlight, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the ground. Emma and James watched in wonder as Morning Star explained through gesture and expression how the stone had been passed down through generations of healers, given only to those who had proven their strength through great trials. News of Morning Star's return spread quickly through the settlement. Women came bearing gifts, fresh bread, new blankets, precious sugar, but she seemed most interested in hearing their stories. Sarah watched as the medicine woman nodded at tales of hardship, overcome, of community built, of wisdom earned. That evening, the town gathered for a feast in Morning Star's honor. She sat with Sarah's family, watching as Emma taught new signs to the other children. The crystal rested on the table between them, its light seeming to pulse with the rhythm of their shared meal. Through Thomas Bear's translation, Morning Star shared the eagle's significance. They were spirit guides, she explained, drawn to those who faced life's storms with courage. She spoke of how the great birds had led her to Sarah's family that first day, knowing they would need both physical and spiritual healing. The crystal, she continued, was a symbol of that healing. Like Sarah's family, it had emerged from darkness into light, its clarity earned through pressure and time. Morning Star demonstrated how to use it in healing rituals, showing Sarah how to read its changing lights, how to channel its energy into her work with others. James, usually shy with strangers, crawled into Morning Star's lap. She taught him to hold the crystal up to the firelight, showing him how its facets caught and transformed the flames. To everyone's surprise, the toddler then began to sign, not their familiar gestures, but movements that Morning Star recognized from her own tribe's medicine ceremonies. "The old ways remember," she signed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They live in the blood, in the spirit." She showed Sarah how James's instinctive movements matched ancient healing dances passed down through countless generations. The eagles landed near the feast, accepting bits of meat offered by the children. Morning Star nodded in approval, explaining that the great birds chose their own family, just as communities chose their healers. Sarah had been chosen twice, first by the eagles, then by the town itself. Before leaving the next morning, Morning Star added one final gift. She taught Sarah and Emma the sacred songs of her people. Though Sarah couldn't hear the melodies, she could feel their vibrations, could see their power in how others responded. Emma learned them perfectly, her young voice carrying the ancient words into the future. The crystal found a place of honor in Sarah's shop, set where the morning sun could catch it. Women would often pause to watch its shifting lights while Sarah mended their clothes or shared her knowledge. It became known as a place of both physical and spiritual healing, where torn fabric and wounded hearts could both be made whole. Morningstar's visit transformed how the town saw Sarah's family. They were no longer just survivors of abandonment, but carriers of ancient wisdom, bridges between different ways of knowing. The crystal became a symbol of this transformation, its light touching everyone who entered the shop. That night, watching the eagles soar against the rising moon, Sarah held the crystal to her heart. She felt its warmth pulse in time with her heartbeat, a reminder that true healing came not just from surviving trials, but from using that survival to help others find their own strength. The ground thawed slowly that spring, revealing rich black soil beneath winter's blanket. Sarah stood on her newly purchased land, 2 acres on the settlement's eastern edge, holding a small leather pouch of seeds. Morning Star had left them as a final gift, each variety carefully wrapped in strips of bark with drawings to show their purpose. The eagles had approved of the location, circling 3 times before landing on what would become the corner posts of their new home. The townsmen had already begun laying the foundation, their labor freely given, in the frontier tradition of barn raising. But it was the garden that captured Sarah's immediate attention. Emma darted between the wooden stakes marking their property, signing enthusiastically about where each plant should go. She remembered Morningstar's teachings well: medicinal herbs in the morning sun, vegetables in the rich afternoon light, flowers to attract helpful insects. James toddled after her, dropping pebbles to mark the rows. The women of River Fork settlement arrived with their own contributions. Seedlings started in winter windowsills, cuts of hardy roses that had survived generations, root vegetables saved from their own harvests. Each plant came with a story, a piece of wisdom, a connection to the community they joined. Sarah's hands moved constantly, teaching and learning new signs for each plant and its uses. The garden became a second classroom, with children gathering after school to help plant and learn. Emma took particular pride in teaching them the signs for different herbs, combining her mother's silent language with Morningstar's ancient knowledge. The house rose steadily around their work. Sarah insisted on east-facing windows to catch the morning light, remembering how the sun had guided them in their darkest days. The eagles supervised the construction, their presence now so common that builders would pause their work to let the great birds inspect their progress. Through it all, the seeds waited in their leather pouch, each one a promise. Sarah planted them with ceremony, following Morningstar's drawings. Healing plants went in first: echinacea, yarrow, sage, their places marked with colored stones. Then came the vegetables, the grains, the flowers that would feed both body and spirit. James proved to have a natural touch with growing things. His small hands seemed to know instinctively how deeply to plant each seed, how much water to give. Sarah watched in wonder as her son, too young to remember their desperate days in the forest, connected so naturally with the earth's rhythms. The town's children brought treasures for the garden: pretty stones for borders, broken pottery for markers, strips of bright cloth to scare away birds. Emma organized them into working groups, her slate covered with drawings, showing where each decoration should go. Their garden became a community creation, just as their survival had been a community effort. Sarah added her own touches: a meditation bench faced east toward the rising sun, its wood carved with signs and symbols that told their story. Here, the eagles first appeared. Here, they found shelter. Here, they learned to survive. Here, they chose to thrive. The first sprouts appeared. As the house neared completion, tiny green fingers reaching for the sky, each one a victory over winter's memory. Sarah felt their strength in the soil she tended, saw their determination mirror her own journey from abandoned wife to respected settler. Emma's slate now carried detailed drawings of each plant, combining Miss Thompson's scientific teachings with Morningstar's wisdom. She taught the younger children how to recognize helpful insects, which weeds could be eaten, how to read the weather in the sky. Her lessons mixed sign language with practical knowledge, building bridges between different ways of understanding the world. The eagles brought their own contributions, dropping seeds from distant meadows, spreading fertility with their hunting leavings. The garden flourished under their attention, becoming a place where nature and human effort worked in harmony. As the last wall of their house rose, Sarah planted Morningstar's final gift, a rare healing herb that bloomed only in moonlight. Its seeds lay nested in soft moss, wrapped in a scrap of paper, bearing a single word in the medicine woman's careful hand: home. Sarah pressed the seeds into the earth as the sun set, feeling the vibrations of hammers finishing their new house. Tomorrow, they would sleep under their own roof. Tonight, they planted roots that went deeper than soil, stronger than memory, more lasting than fear. The summer solstice brought Morningstar's entire tribe to River Fork Settlement. They came at dawn, their wagons decorated with eagle feathers and bright cloth, their arrival heralded by the 3 golden eagles that had become Sarah's constant guardians. In Morningstar's hands was a necklace unlike any Sarah had seen, crafted from polished stones, rare shells, and sacred beads, each piece telling part of an ancient story. The medicine woman's eyes held deep meaning as she gestured for Sarah and her children to join the tribal elders by the river. The town gathered to witness the ceremony, standing respectfully as Morningstar explained through Thomas Bear's translation. The eagles chose this family, now we choose them too. The necklace caught the morning light, its stones seeming to hold the same inner fire as the healing crystal. Emma stood tall in the new dress Sarah had made her, understanding the gravity of the moment. Even James was solemn, his small hand clutching the eagle feather he'd found in their garden that morning. The tribe had brought similar feathers, dozens of them, collected over many moons, waiting for this day. The ceremony began with smoke from sacred herbs, the kind Sarah now grew in her garden. The tribal women moved in circular patterns, their feet raising soft dust as they danced. Though Sarah couldn't hear their songs, she felt their vibrations through the earth, saw their power in how the eagles circled overhead. Morningstar placed the necklace around Sarah's neck with careful reverence. Each stone, she explained through sign, represented a different kind of strength: survival, healing, wisdom, community. The shells spoke of distant waters, reminding them that all peoples were connected. The beads carried prayers centuries old. Emma received a smaller necklace, crafted with sky-blue stones that matched the eagle's summer hunting sky. James's tiny version held smooth river rocks, chosen by Morningstar for their connection to his natural healing gifts. The tribe shared their own sign language, showing how their hand talks differed from and yet complemented Sarah's signs. New gestures were exchanged, bridges built between different ways of silent speech. Emma proved especially quick at learning the tribal signs, her hands flying as she combined both languages. As the sun reached its height, the tribe's hunters brought out special gifts: furs, dried meat, tools crafted just for Sarah's family. But the most precious gift came when the tribal storyteller stepped forward. Through an intricate combination of sign and symbol, she showed Sarah how their story would now be added to the tribe's oral history. The eagles landed during the feast that followed, accepting choice morsels from both tribal members and settlers. Morningstar nodded in approval, signing that the great bird's participation was the highest blessing. They were not just spirit guides now, but witnesses to this joining of families, this bridging of worlds. Sarah touched the necklace, feeling the ancient stories trapped in each stone. She thought of all the hands that had shaped these pieces, all the prayers spoken over them, all the wisdom they carried. Like the healing crystal, the necklace was both gift and responsibility, a reminder that they were now part of something larger than themselves. That evening, as the tribe prepared to leave, Morningstar shared one final teaching. The necklace, she explained, would grow warmer when danger threatened, cooler when healing was needed. It was both protection and guide, just as the eagles were both guardians and teachers. The children of both communities had spent the day learning each other's games, each other's signs, each other's stories. As the tribal wagons departed, promises were made to meet again at the harvest moon. Emma's hands flew with excitement as she signed about all she had learned, all she hoped to learn still. Sarah stood in her garden that night, watching the eagles make one final circle before roosting. The necklace seemed to pulse gently against her skin, its stones warming to her touch. They had been adopted not just into a tribe, but into an ancient way of seeing the world, one where silence held wisdom, where signs carried power, where eagles chose their own family. Sarah found the journal in a trunk of supplies Thomas Bear had brought from the eastern settlements. Leather-bound and empty, its pages weighted like fresh snow for the first footprint. She ran her fingers over the smooth paper, remembering how her own mother had kept such a journal, recording family stories Sarah could never hear spoken. The town council had approached her that morning with an unprecedented request. Would she consider teaching other deaf children? Word of Emma's success had spread to neighboring settlements, and families were asking to send their children to River Fork to learn Sarah's unique combination of sign language, practical skills, and tribal wisdom. Now, sitting in her garden, while the eagles circled lazily overhead, Sarah opened the journal to its first page. Her pen moved carefully, recording not just words, but a vision. Today we plant seeds of understanding, that others might harvest hope. Emma burst into the garden, her slate covered with excited drawings. She'd already designed where the new schoolroom could be built, an addition to their home, with windows facing both sunrise and the eagle's favorite perches. Her small hands flew as she described how she could help teach the younger children. The news spread quickly through the settlement. By sunset, Sarah's garden was full of visitors offering help. The blacksmith promised to craft special tools for children who needed to learn through touch. Miss Thompson arrived with armloads of books, eager to collaborate on ways to teach reading through sign. Morning Star's necklace warmed against Sarah's skin as she wrote in the journal, recording each offer of help, each new idea. She described the way Emma taught, combining settler signs with tribal wisdom. She noted James's gentle way with smaller children, how he seemed to know instinctively what each one needed. The first new student arrived before construction even began, a tiny girl from 3 settlements over, her eyes bright with curiosity and longing. Sarah recognized the look of isolation, of living in a world of silence among those who spoke. By day's end, the child was helping Emma in the garden, her hands already forming basic signs. Sarah wrote late into the night, filling pages with everything she wished she'd known as a child. She recorded Morning Star's teachings about healing, plants, the eagle's lessons in courage, the town's example of true community. Each entry was a stepping stone for future children who would walk this path. Other settlements began sending more than just students. Women arrived seeking Sarah's knowledge of crafts and healing. Men came to learn her methods of working with children who experienced the world differently. The journal's pages filled with their stories, their questions, their discoveries. Emma proved to be a natural teacher, her own journey from frightened child to confident young leader, inspiring others. She added her own notes to the journal, drawings of signs, sketches of useful plants, observations about what helped each new student learn best. The eagles seemed to approve of the growing school. They brought special feathers, not just from their own kind, but from birds all across the territory. Sarah wrote about each one, noting their meanings in both settler and tribal traditions. The feathers became teaching tools, helping children learn about the natural world through touch and sight. James, not yet 5, showed an uncanny ability to calm frightened newcomers. Sarah recorded his methods, how he used gentle touches, simple signs, and his connection to growing things to help children find their place in this new world of understanding. The journal's pages soon held more than teaching methods. Sarah wrote about the strength found in silence, the wisdom of watching rather than speaking, the power of finding one's own way to communicate with the world. She described how deafness had taught her to read the land during their survival time, to understand the eagle's messages, to see what others might miss. As autumn approached, bringing more students and their families to River Fork, Sarah added something special to the journal. Pressed leaves from plants Morning Star had helped them identify, each one labeled with its healing properties in both English and sign drawings. These pages would help future generations connect with the Earth's ancient wisdom. The final entry that season was written by moonlight as Sarah sat in her garden watching the eagles roost. "We who live in silence," she wrote, "carry music in our hands, stories in our movements, wisdom in our ways of seeing. This journal is a bridge between our world and others, a path for those who will follow, a reminder that different ways of being are not lesser ways of living." Emma found her there, adding her own small note beneath her mother's words. "Love speaks in many ways." Together they watched the moon rise over their growing school, their expanding community, their unfolding legacy. The day the truth about the eagles was revealed began with a dream. Sarah woke at dawn, her hand clutching Morningstar's necklace, which burned warm against her palm. Outside, all three eagles circled lower than ever, their wings nearly brushing the roof of the schoolhouse. Emma was the first to notice something different about their behavior. The great birds weren't just circling, they were weaving a pattern in the sky, like a message written in flight. Their movements matched symbols Sarah had seen in the cave paintings so many months ago. As the sun rose higher, more signs appeared. Morningstar's tribe arrived unexpectedly, their wagons approaching from the east. The healing crystal in Sarah's shop window cast rainbow patterns that danced in the same circular motion as the eagles overhead. Even James's herbs seemed to bend in meaningful ways, following some invisible current. Morningstar stepped down from her wagon, her face solemn with purpose. In her hands, she carried something wrapped in ancient leather, a single, perfect eagle. Feather, larger than any they had seen before, its surface marked with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. "Time for understanding," she signed, gathering Sarah's family in their garden. The tribal elders formed a circle around them, their hands moving in ancient gestures Sarah had never seen before. The eagles landed on 3 posts, forming a triangle around the gathering. Through a combination of sign, symbol, and Thomas Bear's careful translation, Morningstar revealed the truth. The eagles were more than just birds, more than even spirit guides. They were messengers from ancestors who had watched over this land. Since the first people walked it, the feather she held had been passed down through generations of medicine women, each adding their own mark to its surface. Now, Morningstar explained, it was time for Sarah to add hers. The eagles had chosen her family not just for protection, but for a greater purpose. Emma gasped as Morningstar held the feather in a shaft of sunlight. Hidden patterns emerged, maps of star positions, ancient trade routes, and most significantly, symbols for different ways of communicating with the spirit world. Sarah's signs, Emma's teaching methods, James's healing touch, all were represented in the feather's ancient markings. "Your silence," Morningstar signed, "is not absence of sound, it is presence of other wisdom." She showed them how the eagle's flight patterns matched the symbols on the feather, how they had been teaching Sarah's family a forgotten language all along. The truth unfolded like a flower opening to the sun. The eagles hadn't just saved them. That first desperate night, they had recognized in Sarah's family the ability to bridge worlds. Her deafness wasn't a barrier but a gift, allowing her to understand messages others might miss. James touched the feather with gentle fingers, and the symbols briefly glowed beneath his touch. Morningstar nodded in approval. The boy's healing abilities, his connection to growing things, his intuitive understanding of others' needs, all were part of the ancient wisdom the eagles had sought to preserve. The 3 great birds watched from their posts as Morningstar pressed the feather into Sarah's hands. Its surface was warm, alive with centuries of accumulated knowledge. Sarah felt its power pulse in rhythm with her necklace, with the crystal in her window, with the very earth beneath her feet. Emma's slate had fallen forgotten to the ground as she watched the eagles with new understanding. All this time, as she taught others to sign, she had been doing more than sharing language. She had been helping preserve an ancient way of seeing the world, one where wisdom didn't need sound to be heard. The tribal elders began a ceremony, moving in patterns that matched both the eagle's flight and the symbols on the feather. Sarah felt the vibrations of their songs through the earth, saw how they matched the ripples in her garden's plants, understood, at last, how everything was connected. Morning Star explained their new responsibility. The feather would help them recognize others who carried old wisdom in new forms. Their school would become more than a place for teaching sign language. It would be a center for preserving ancient knowledge, for helping others understand the messages written in nature's movements. As the ceremony ended, the eagles took flight. One last time, dropping 3 smaller feathers that landed in a perfect triangle around Sarah's family. These too were marked with symbols, but ones that spoke of the future rather than the past. Morning Star smiled as she read them. New stories. Beginning, she signed. Your silence speaks with eagle's voice. Now, Sarah held the ancient feather to her heart, feeling its warmth merge with her necklace's power. She understood now why they had survived that first abandonment, why the eagles had led them here. Some wisdom could only be preserved by those who knew how to listen with more than ears. 1 year to the day after John had abandoned them in the forest, Sarah stood in her garden watching a traveling artist set up his equipment. The entire settlement had gathered for the occasion, not to remember the abandonment, but to celebrate how far they had come. The artist's camera was a rare thing on the frontier, brought specially by Thomas Bear for this day. Sarah had never had a family portrait taken before. John had always said it was too expensive, though now she understood he'd simply never intended them to have such permanent proof of belonging. Emma helped position everyone according to the artist's instructions. The school's new students, 12 now from settlements all around, arranged themselves in front of Sarah's house. Their parents stood proudly behind them, hands ready to sign. Morning Star's tribe had traveled for the occasion, their ceremonial clothes adding bright colors to the scene. The eagles chose that moment to appear, circling 3 times before, landing on the roof above the group. The artist was amazed, but the townspeople simply smiled. No portrait of Sarah's family would be complete without their winged guardians. Sarah wore all her sacred objects for the portrait: Morning Star's necklace, the healing crystal on a chain, the ancient eagle feather worked into her hair. Emma had decorated her slate with pressed flowers from their garden. James held a bundle of his healing herbs. Each item told part of their story. The portrait would capture more than just faces. It would show the school they'd built, with its special windows angled to catch the light in ways that made signs easier to see. It would show Sarah's thriving garden, where healing plants grew alongside vegetables, and children learned the wisdom of growing things. It would show the eagles, their presence a testament to spiritual truths most had forgotten. As the artist made his final adjustments, Sarah felt the vibrations of many feet shuffling into position. She saw hands move in multiple sign languages, settler signs mixing with tribal gestures, children inventing new combinations that bridged both worlds. This too would be captured in the portrait, this beautiful confusion of communication. Morning Star stepped forward at the last moment, placing something in Sarah's hands, a simple wooden frame, carved with symbols matching those on the ancient eagle feather. This would hold the portrait, connecting past and future, art and artifact, memory and hope. The camera's flash caught them all in a moment of joy. Sarah couldn't hear the artist's countdown, but she felt Emma squeeze her hand, saw James's bright smile, sensed the eagles spread their wings as if blessing the moment. The portrait would show them not as survivors, but as people who had learned to thrive. Afterward, as the community shared a feast in their garden, Sarah watched the children play. Deaf and hearing students mixed freely, all using signs, all understanding each other. The tribal children taught frontier games, while settler children shared new signs. Emma moved among them like a young teacher, her confidence radiating from within. James had found his own path, spending time with both Morning Star and the settlement's doctor, learning to combine different healing traditions. The tribal elders said he had old wisdom in young hands. The eagles seemed to watch him especially closely, as if knowing his gifts would help preserve their ancient messages. The portrait would be more than decoration. Sarah would hang it in the schoolhouse as proof that different ways of living could come together, that loss could lead to discovery, that silence could hold its own kind of music. Future students would see it and understand that their differences were strengths. As evening approached, Sarah opened her journal, no longer empty, but filled with a year's worth of wisdom, teaching notes and stories. She wrote about the portrait session, about how far they had come from that first desperate night in the forest. The eagles had led them not just to safety, but to purpose. Emma added her own note beneath Sarah's entry, her handwriting strong. And sure, the eagles chose us because we could listen with our hearts. James drew a small picture of 3 feathers. Even at his young age, he understood the symbolism of their journey. The portrait would arrive in a few weeks, traveling back with Thomas Bear's next supply wagon. But Sarah already knew what it would show. Not just faces and places, but the invisible bonds between people who had learned to see past differences, who had built something new from ancient wisdom. That night, as the celebration wound down, Sarah stood in her garden under a sky filled with stars. The eagles made one final circle overhead before flying east toward the rising moon. Morning Star's necklace warmed against her skin, and the ancient eagle feather in her hair trembled with familiar power. 1 year ago, she had been an abandoned wife with 2 frightened children. Now she was a teacher, a healer, a preserver of wisdom. The portrait would capture this transformation, but the real story would live on in the signs they taught, the wisdom they shared, and the bridges they built between worlds.